film world was changed forever with the release of 1979's Alien from Ridley Scott. This really took the subgenre of sci-fi horror that had existed, all the way back to, the 50s and 60s, but really, really brought it into the modern view and kind of made it, mainstream in a way, in quotations. And this was a really influential film on a bunch of different mediums across pop culture. It's been, memed and parodied thousands and thousands of times. And then, of course, we got the sequel Aliens a few years later as well from James Cameron, which also kind of just did the same thing, even though they're two very different films. So, of course, this all bled over to video games, because as soon as, people started making video games, they thought of Alien. They thought of, a lot of people were really inspired by either Alien or Aliens, and they wanted to, base their game around the ideas of it. In fact, there were so many games even just on the NES that, parodied Aliens or were, based around Aliens. There were so many, too many, in fact, to count. But not only did we have those, we also had many, many, many licensed Alien video games, and we're going to get into those today with a deep dive on them. Now, I will kind of make a couple notes here before we kind of get into this, because this is going to be a long topic, so feel free to sit down, get your popcorn and snacks, and just relax and kind of sit back and enjoy as I regale you of the history of Alien video games. But this video will not talk about Alien versus Predator video games, because that's actually going to get its own video much farther down the line, because I kind of want to do Alien games today, and then Predator video games at one point, and then we'll do Alien versus Predator, the ultimate mashup, to kind of go over not only that too, but if we talked about all the Alien versus Predator video games today, this video would never end, and we would just be here all day. So we're gonna kind of skip that. Also, make sure to like the video, subscribe if you haven't subscribed already, ring that notification bell to be notified whenever we put up new videos on the channel, or, let me know in the comments below what your favorite Alien video game is. So let's talk about the first Alien, because of course, the movie itself was kind of like, a haunted house in space where, you had the one alien creature that was way more powerful than any of the human characters that didn't really have any weapons. They had a couple flamethrowers, but, they didn't really have a lot of fuel or anything like that, because, they were basically like space miners. They were not, space marines or anything like that. So it was kind of hard probably to put together an Alien video game, but boy howdy, they tried to. And let's take a look at Alien for Atari 2600. This was the very first Alien game. I'm sure it's going to nail all the tension and the tone of the movie and, be like this big spooky experience. Right? It's a Pac-Man clone. Of course it's a Pac-Man clone. Why would I expect an Alien game based off the movie Alien to actually, be like the movie Alien and to not be, a Pac-Man clone? Like, come on. It's one of those things where around this time period, a lot of companies were actually trying to get in on the Pac-Man craze, because it was around this time, it was probably the biggest game in the world. Arcades had a ton of it there. That we had that, terrible Atari 2600 version of Pac-Man. So of course everyone was trying to do their own version of Pac-Man. And of course, 20th Century Fox decided to make their own version of Pac-Man with Alien. And in fact, let's read the instruction manual, shall we, to kind of figure out what's going on here in this game. Your job is to run through the hallways of the Nostromo and crush all the alien eggs which have been placed there. You must avoid or destroy the adult aliens and snatch up as many prizes as possible. The craziest thing about this game and this statement is the fact that this game came out before Aliens came out. So we hadn't had a movie where, you had a bunch of alien eggs besides, of course, the scene in the alien ship anyways. In the first movie, you didn't have multiple aliens at all. So it's just like, it's one of those things where it doesn't make sense. I can't even understand why how they came up with the concept of being like, oh, well, there's multiple aliens, in this game based off this movie where there were only one. So it's so weird to think about. And I mean, it's not just a Pac-Man clone, because also when you beat a level, you then, have to kind of like cross the road with a whole bunch of aliens kind of going back and forth. It's basically Frogger. So you're basically, aping Pac-Man and Frogger in the same video game, where it has no real reason to do that. Again, it feels like this was at one point another game that they then put like the alien name on it and just kind of call it a day. So it's just very, very weird and strange. But this was the first game based on Alien. And as you're going to see, a lot of the other Alien games kind of like carry on this same legacy where, the games aren't really like the movies at all. We do eventually get, games that play like the Alien movies, which we'll get to a little bit later in the show. So 2 years later, in 1984, we actually did get another game based on Alien, and it was for the Commodore 64 of all consoles. So it was like a PC game, and it was mostly text-based. And I haven't actually played this game myself. The footage you're seeing is from another channel. By the way, this is going to happen multiple times throughout the video because this is the first time I've really done a video like this where I haven't been able to play every single game that's available. But I wanted to at least still provide some historical context for them. So I'm going to have links in the show notes if you want to learn more about some of these games, or if you want to, watch the videos that I pulled these from, and definitely if you want to learn more, I want to provide you all the information for you to do that. So in this game, it's kind of like an overhead view of the Nostromo itself with all of the different, areas of the ship. And then you've got your list of survivors on the right-hand side. And you're basically having your characters explore the ship, try and hunt down the alien, but you're also trying to escape, trying to, get the alien off the Nostromo, essentially. So you're trying to, lure it into a different section, a specific section of the ship, so you can, blow it out the airlock. And again, I think this is, an interesting concept for the game, and definitely, it's much closer to what I would actually expect of, a video game based off the movie Alien itself. This is the type of experience I would really be expecting more than, the Pac-Man clone that we got on 2600. Again, I haven't played it myself, but it seems really interesting, and I'm interested to know if any of y'all have played this one or any of the other games I'm going to talk about a little bit later that I haven't had a chance to play myself. So a few years later, we got the release of Aliens from James Cameron. And of course, this movie was much more action-based. You had multiple aliens, and actually, believe it or not, if the first, Alien game, the 2600 game, was based off Aliens, I think it would have made more sense in context. But, of course, we had so many games and other things influenced by Aliens. It was a really influential film, just in general. So, of course, we got, some Alien video games. In fact, before doing research for this particular video, I didn't know we had Aliens video game back in the day because we didn't have a traditional console Alien video games, at least not here in North America. And we're going to get into some of these. We're going to start with the Commodore 64 Aliens game. This released in the same year as the movie came out. And actually, it's very similar and almost like a sequel to the original Alien that we got on Commodore 64, where you're controlling the different Marines and you're going around different sections of Haley's Hope, and you're trying to, destroy some aliens and rescue some survivors from Haley's Hope and stuff. And really kind of you're going through the events of the movie. So in a way, it kind of follows the movie in an interesting way. Yes, it's not really like a first-person shooter or anything like that, so it's not super action-based, but there is some action. It's definitely more than the text-based sort of adventure that the first, Commodore 64 Alien title was. It is a little more exploration-based. You're doing more stuff in this game. So it felt more like your traditional console experience. The following year, we actually got Alien 2 Aliens on MSX PCs. This was a Japan-only title. This was never actually released here in North America, which is too bad because this game is pretty dang cool. So this game comes to us from Squaresoft, and this came to us before Final Fantasy. This came out the same year Final Fantasy did in 1987, and Uematsu, of course, the famous Final Fantasy composer, actually did all the music for this game, which is just, weird and crazy to think about, but it's not an RPG. Because again, this was back when Squaresoft was trying a bunch of different stuff. They had Rad Racer, they had Final Fantasy, they weren't just the RPG company that we kind of know them to be today. Back in 1987, they were trying bunch of different things. So this game's pretty cool. It's like a side-scrolling action platformer where you play as Ripley, and you're going through, you're killing facehuggers, you're shooting xenomorphs. You at the end of the level you fight a queen alien, and it's all big and scary and stuff like that. The music's pretty great. There's some. It does kind of run at like a slowish frame rate on the MSX computer, so it can be a little tough to play. But I think this game is super interesting and cool. And this game was supposed to come out, on Famicom Disk System, which then probably would have led to an NES release eventually. But it did get canceled on the Disk System because that was around the time when the Disk System was starting to lose interest a little bit. And I think people just weren't super into the disc system. So it ended up actually being canceled for disc system, which then I think led in turn to it never actually coming to NES, because otherwise it might have come to NES eventually, which is too bad, because I actually think that it would have run really well on there. In fact, there's actually like a prototype version of the Famicom Decision version that's out there for people to play, which I'm glad that actually was able to be preserved, and it runs a lot better than the MSX version. So I actually almost wish that it did come out. And then the last Aliens game that we'll talk about now, there are some more that are newer that we'll talk about later in the show, is the 1990 arcade game from Konami.
Aliens.
This is very much in the line of other Konami games we got in the arcade around the same time. You know, we got, you play as Ripley. Again, you're killing just waves and waves of aliens, but like, you got really weird types of aliens this time. You got like, jellyfish style aliens. You got like all kinds of weird xenomorphs in this one. Like they kind of went all out and did some goofy things with this one. You even got kind of like behind the back kind of third person shooter kind of sections as well with this arcade machine. Like it was a really interesting arcade game. Of course, since it's a Konami game, it had great visuals. It had great music. And it's one that, it's an arcade machine I didn't really see that often as a kid. I saw it 1 or 2 times in the arcades, but like this was kind of, to me anyways, it felt like it was an uncommon arcade machine where it was very different from Turtles or Simpsons or X-Men, where I saw those at a lot of different places I would go to play arcade games. But Aliens in the arcade was just one that I just didn't really see that often, which is too bad because it's actually a pretty fun game. We got the next movie in the Alien franchise, Alien 3. Now, you might also be thinking, Ryan, how does Alien 3 make a good game? Because just like, the case with the first Alien, you have Ripley and she's on a prison planet and they don't have any weapons, and there's one alien and they lure it into this like mold to then, pour like liquid metal on it to basically, melt it essentially. Like that's how they kill the alien at the end. So it's just like, how did they make a video game about that? Well, let me tell you, this was the one they went all out with as far as video games. There was video games for Alien 3 on literally every console under the sun. And the crazy thing about it was we were in this time period where, we would get Alien 3 on multiple consoles, but they wouldn't be the same game. It would actually pretty much be a different game on every console. And we're not going to, go into the details of all the different variations, but the first one we'll talk about, of course, is on all the Sega consoles. So Genesis, Game Gear, Master System, they pretty much got the same game on there. And as well, the NES version got a slightly, changed version of the same game where you play as Ripley, you're in, the prison, on the prison planet, and you're going around different levels because it is linear based. So there are, different levels, and you're rescuing prisoners, and you have a time limit where you have to rescue all the prisoners and then escape the level. And if you don't do that within the time limit, then you fail the mission and you have to basically redo it from scratch. So this game is very trial and error based. It's a game where, you have to kind of learn where all the prisoners are, and you're going to fail a bunch of times before you kind of get it right. But once you've got it memorized, I actually think Alien 3 is a pretty fun game. This was a game that I actually grew up with playing the Genesis version a ton. And I just really love the music and the visuals in this game. It was done by Probe Entertainment, and they did a bunch of Genesis games. And I think that it was really strong on this console. Otherwise, the Game Gear or the NES ones, they have their own set of problems. The Game Gear, for example, is because of the Game Gear screen, is cut off in a specific way, where even though the game runs really well and is very similar to the Master System version, in fact, it's almost the same game, the sides of the screen are cropped, so you don't have as much screen real estate, so you can't usually see the aliens coming at you half the time. They'll run at you and you won't see them until it's too late to even start shooting and killing them. And same with the NES version, where even though you have more screen real estate than you probably ever need, the way it works is that Ripley will run really, really fast, and the screen just doesn't keep up with her running. So you get to the kind of towards the edge of the right side or the left side of the screen as you're running in a direction. And the alien itself, same problem as the Game Gear version. If they run at you when that happens, you can't see them in time to shoot at them. So they always will hit you every single time. But all in all, I think these versions of these games are pretty fun. Again, if you're into, trial and error style experience, I think you'll enjoy these ones. We also got Alien 3 on Game Boy, which is different from every single other version of it. It's a top-down game. It follows the events of the movies. Like, it has, cutscenes with all the different characters talking, and going into, the different styles of the game. But, I really couldn't get out of the first area in this game where it's like, hey, you got to unlock these doors because we locked you in this prison area, Ripley, because we don't want, the other prisoners to, attack you, because that was a thing in the movie. Was she landed on a prison planet it was like an all-male prison planet, and of course they hadn't seen a woman in years, so they feared the worst anyway. So you're exploring the prison planet top down. You're trying to figure out a way to get out of the first area, and I honestly just got lost and didn't really know what I was supposed to do. I didn't look up a guide because I wasn't enjoying myself that much, but it's there, it exists, it's fine. And then, of course, coming later that year, we also got the Super Nintendo version of Alien 3. And this one was different, again, from all the other games, where this is actually more of a Metroidvania game coming to us, again, from Probe Entertainment, but also published by LJN. So people, of course, see that logo and they immediately think it's bad. But I think this is actually one of the better Alien games. Again, it's got some great visuals and sound, like the Genesis version. But for the most part, you again play as Ripley, and you basically have different objectives inside the station, and you can kind of go in any order you want, although Ripley gets different abilities throughout the experience that will then allow you to gain access to areas that you don't have access to before. So again, it is very Metroidvania-like, which I like. I actually think that this is a pretty good Super Nintendo game based on Alien 3. Probably the like one of the best ways you can play this, and one of the best concepts they had for this. But again, like, none of these are really like the movie, because there's tons of aliens and facehuggers and other creatures to fight. And then if you want to go really out there was an Alien 3 arcade game called Alien 3 The Gun, which was like an FMV kind of game, but it was also like a light gun shooter, where you and another player are going around the prison planet, and there's just billions of aliens on this planet for some reason. Tons of face huggers, and it's a pretty fun game as well. You have alternate paths. They can go down kind of like the Dungeons and Dragons arcade game, very similarly structured to that. And I think it's actually a lot of fun to actually go back to it today if you have the means to play Alien 3 The Gun. Well, with the move to CD-based consoles, we did get a couple Alien games on the PlayStation 1 as well as other consoles. Of course, we got Alien Trilogy was the first one. This came out actually early in the PlayStation 1's life cycle. It also came out on Sega Saturn as well. And this is basically a Doom clone. It's a first-person shooter. You play, once again, as Ripley. And it actually starts in Hades Hope in Aliens. And then it goes to the prison planet for Alien 3. And then it goes backwards in time, almost like a flashback to the Nostromo to do kind of the alien part of the trilogy. And this was actually something common that Fox actually did with some of the properties, because we also got Die Hard Trilogy around the same time, which was like 3 different games as one. This they didn't do that with. It's all kind of connected as one kind of game. It's very linear based. You're basically just trying to escape areas, kind of like in Doom. Very similar structure to Doom. If you've played Doom before, you probably know what to expect with something like Alien Trilogy. But I think this is actually pretty fun. If you want to learn more about this, actually, we have a video on the channel all about Alien Trilogy. So if you want to learn more about this game in particular, go check that on the channel. The link will be up in the card. I'm assuming I'm pointing in the right direction. And then in 2000, as the PS2 was going to come out the following year, we got another Alien game on PlayStation 2, because we got another Alien movie, Alien Resurrection. So this is actually the only game based on Alien Resurrection that is in existence. This was originally going to come to the Dreamcast, but it ended up getting canceled because, well, the Dreamcast kind of fell apart around the time that this game came out, because they were assuming, hey, the Dreamcast was, going to be this system that was going to last forever, but, it didn't. But Alien Resurrection, also a first-person game, but it's less of a shooter, and it's more of like a first-person kind of exploration game, with some shooting in it as well, because you do have to shoot some xenomorphs. You've also got soldiers that you have to fight, because for some reason the soldiers on this ship are trying to also murder you in addition to the xenomorphs. But what's cool about this game is you don't just play as Ripley like all the other Alien games. You actually play as Call as well. Call being, Winona Ryder's character in the movie, and they both have like different objectives throughout the game, and you kind of switch between the two of move them throughout the story. So I like the idea of playing between the two different characters. And I think this game's, pretty good too. It's not, amazing or anything to write home about. But I do think, it's more fun than you'd expect an Alien Resurrection game to be. Moving on, the Game Boy Color also got its own unique twist on the Alien franchise with Aliens, the Thanatos Encounter. This is like a top-down game where you play as one of 4 Marines, and you're exploring, this ship. You're trying to get to the Thanatos, which is this ship that's been taken over by the Xenomorphs, because I guess the Weyland-Yutani Company did not learn their lesson and decided to bring the alien eggs up to the Thanatos and breed Xenomorphs there, which, of course, always leads to problems. But what's cool about this game is it kind of plays like, the old Ninja Turtles games in a way where if one of your Marines dies, you can rescue them, but you kind of lose that Marine until you rescue them from the aliens, presumably that you can, because you have 200 seconds from the time that they die in order to rescue them somewhere in the level that you're in. It is, level based, and, it's a kind of like a top-down shooter where you're walking up to civilians to kind of rescue them. There's aliens and you have to shoot them, and you usually have to kill every single alien in the level. But one of the frustrating things about this game is that you shoot from your right hand, or you can assign it to your left hand. But either way, you're shooting from the left or the right side of your character, which is very wide on the screen, which usually it's harder to line up shots because you don't shoot in a straight line in front of your character. So it's hard to hit the enemies in this one with the guns. And honestly, I felt it was kind of like a frustrating experience. It was too bad because I actually think like the visuals hold up pretty well over time. And I think there's some fun to be had with this game. If it controlled correctly, and if I thought the controls would be pretty smooth, then I think this would be pretty fun. But unfortunately, it just misses the mark by a bit. After Aliens, the Thanatos Encounter released in 2001, it was pretty much a dark period for any Alien game that wasn't AVP at this point. But in 2011, we got a Nintendo DS game called Aliens Infestation. This came to us from Sega, and this was when Sega obtained the Aliens license, and they gave us a couple Aliens games that we'll talk about here. And this game is really awesome. This one's an underrated gem that I know a lot of people missed on the Nintendo DS because there just weren't that many copies of this out there. Like, I think a lot of people missed this game. This comes to us from WayForward, the company that makes the Shantae games. And it's a Metroidvania where you, kind of like the Thanatos Encounter, you play as a group of Space Marines that have, different, attributes. And so they have different strengths and weaknesses. And if one of them dies, you can rescue them later. But it's just really, really fun. It's a really fun Metroidvania game. Fantastic visuals and great music, and just great level design. I think like this game is really well designed, and I love the way that it plays. I love the way that you play as the different Marines, and it's just a very fun Metroidvania game. So if you like Metroidvanias and you like Aliens games, I mean, this one's honestly one of the best Aliens games out there. And it's on the Nintendo DS, and I know a lot of people haven't checked this one out. And I know the price on this is pretty expensive because it never got a re-release on any console for whatever reason. And if you want to actually have like a sample of what this game kind of plays like, there is a modern game that was kind of like a spiritual successor to this. It's called The Mummy Demastered, because that's an old chess that I haven't talked about in a long time. Released on modern platforms, and that's kind of based off the newest Mummy movie, so not the Brendan Fraser one, the Tom Cruise one. And it's also Metroidvania, made by WayForward in kind of the same style as this game was. So yeah, I think this game's really, really good, and not a lot of people have played this one. In 2013, though, of course, we had Gearbox Software step into the ring, partnering with Sega for the big, grandiose return of Aliens. They wanted to do a big canonic sequel to the movie, and that's how we got Aliens Colonial Marines. This was a game that was shown off on E3 multiple times, and in multiple showings, it looked like a completely different game than what we actually got, where this game was a mess when it came out. The AI is terrible. The aliens just kind of run straight at you. It does not look good visually, especially the Xbox 360 version, which you're actually seeing in the gameplay footage here. Doesn't look great. It does not look great. It looks much better on PC. So if you're playing on a modern computer, you can actually get some good-looking visuals out of this. I wouldn't say great, but, good-looking visuals. They even brought back Michael Biehn for this, okay? And Lance Hendrickson and all, they brought back some of the original cast, but it really felt like they were, trying to recreate all the sets from the original Aliens. Like they were really proud of, the locker area on the Sulaco being exactly the same as it was in the original movie, or Haley's Hope being, exactly the same as it was in the original movie. So they were more, they seemed like they were more preoccupied with making all the levels look and feel as authentic as possible, but just not making the game as fun to play as possible. So there were a ton of problems with Aliens Colonial Marines, unfortunately. And it could actually, use like its own episode of this to kind of go over kind of the complicated history of Aliens Colonial Marines. But I will say that, I didn't hate it as much as a lot of people did at the time it came out. Like, I played it on PC, I had it pre-ordered, and I actually, kind of had a good time with it. But I could definitely understand if you played the console version first, why you wouldn't like this game as much. But I actually, didn't hate it. It's definitely not the worst Alien game I ever played. Even it's better than, like the Alien 3 on Game Boy or things like that. Like, I think there are some good things about this game, but for the most part, it's pretty terrible. It's definitely the worst modern Alien video game. Creative Assembly and Sega announced, one of the games that, one of the game ideas that I had a long time ago, when thinking about what I would personally want for an Alien game, seeing games like Outlast come out or Amnesia to the Dark Descent, I thought to myself, man, it would be really cool if we got like a stealth Alien game where you were powerless, you didn't really have a lot of weapons or tools at your disposal, and you kind of got hunted by the alien, and it would almost be like what it would be like to be in a room with an actual xenomorph in real life. Well, we got that in Alien Isolation. Of course, this is the Nostromo edition, which includes some DLC. Again, they brought back the original cast of the original Alien. Like, this was my dream game, like the game that me and big fan of Alien, Alien, the original one, is my favorite movie of all time. Like, this was the game I was waiting for. And yes, we talked about it on the Xbox Drive before. This game isn't perfect. It's got its flaws. It's got its problems. The fact that it's, 10 hours longer than it needs to be. The fact that, some of the combat is, okay at best, especially like the Worker Joes and stuff like that. But man, they nailed everything else about it. The atmosphere, the music, the dialogue, the characters themselves, like everything about it just really, like, playing it just felt like an authentic Alien experience, and really like the most authentic feeling Alien game across all the games in the entire series. Like, Alien Isolation, one of my all-time favorite games, despite the fact that, again, it's got problems. I am still a big champion for this game. And I love it. I know, it's not for everybody, but I really love this style of game, and I think it perfectly suits the Alien franchise. For a long time as well, after Alien Isolation, we didn't really get Alien games, because after that, Sega, no longer had the Alien license, and there weren't any other companies developing Alien games. We got some mobile games, which we're not going to talk about today, because this episode is long enough already. But in 2021, Focus Entertainment actually acquired the Alien license from 20th Century Fox, and we actually got Aliens Fireteam Elite, which is a Left 4 Dead style Aliens game, and I think this one's just okay. I think there's, some good things to like about it and some bad things. First of all, again, it feels authentic as far as, the music and the visuals and the characters are concerned. There are, xenomorph liberties that they took with this, where the xenomorphs would spit acid, or there would be a bunch of different mutations for the xenomorphs, which was interesting. But I thought this one was just okay. That there were a lot of mindless enemies and mindless ways that you fought, and that's not really the xenomorph style when you watch the movies. Like, they're methodical. They think, like, there's a reason why in Aliens, when they're going to have that big attack towards like the climax of the movie, the aliens cut the power in the facility, because they're intelligent. They're an intelligent race. They're not like Zerglings, where they'll just run straight at you and they're trying to overwhelm you with numbers. That's not the Xenomorphs game. Although, you might misinterpret that a little bit. Like, they're methodical and smart creatures. So it's weird to me that they all kind of are just running you in droves, and they're not, super intelligent. Which is why, again, like a game like this, I kind of have to turn my brain off in order to play it a little bit, because I overthink it a little bit when I consider, the actual franchise itself. But I do think, it's a fun game. I think it's a fun game to play with friends if you've got, a couple buddies and you want to play some co-op. I do think there's some fun time to be had with Aliens Fireteam Elite. And then next month, we are finally getting a new Aliens game. This, of course, Aliens Dark Descent, again from Focus Home Entertainment. And this one is a top-down strategy game, very similar looking to something like Full Spectrum Warrior or something like that. Again, the game's not out at the time of this recording, but I think it looks really interesting and cool. I'm showing kind of the trailer here to kind of show off the game a little bit. And I'm actually excited for this one. I think this one looks pretty cool, and I'm sure we'll be talking about it more after it releases, although it is releasing the same week as Final Fantasy 16, which, as people know, is the game I'm looking forward to the most this year. So it's just going to be one of those things where, we'll get to Aliens Dark Descent eventually, but overall, I think that this game looks pretty cool and looks pretty promising. I also want to touch quickly on some of the canceled Alien games that we've gotten over the years, because there are some experiences that we just never got that we could have gotten at some point. First of all, the Aliens Famicom Disk System game, I talked about it earlier, canceled in 1987. I think that would have been really awesome, especially, playing the prototype and seeing what that looks like. I really think that would have been a pretty good NES game coming out later. We also got Aliens Interactive for the CDI, which got canceled in 1993 because, well, the CDI was kind of a mess. So, I would have been really interested to see what an Alien CDI game would have looked like. It probably would have been like the Jurassic Park 3DO game where it's like a point-and-click adventure kind of game. And that's kind of what I'm imagining with this one. We also had Operation Aliens, which was going to be a Tiger handheld console. It got canceled in 1992 because there was an animated show based off Aliens called Operation Aliens that was supposed to come out, and that ended up getting canceled. So as a result, they canceled the Tiger handheld for the show because, of course, like Tiger handhelds, they made those for literally every show or movie under the sun. And then, of course, probably the biggest Alien project that actually got canceled, and the one that I'm kind of bummed the most out about, is Obsidian's Aliens game. So Obsidian, makers of, South Park: The Stick of Truth or a bunch of different games, Obsidian was going to make an Aliens RPG that was going to be turn-based. I remember this got announced at the same time as Aliens Colonial Marines did, and I was like way more excited for that than Colonial Marines because I love RPGs, and I love Aliens, and I actually felt like that probably would emulate the universe a lot better than something like Colonial Marines did. But unfortunately, there was a bunch of trouble with the development of that game, and it just unfortunately never saw the light of day, and one that I really wish would have come out. And that is it. That is the long and in-depth history of the Alien video games or video games based off the Alien franchise. There are so many games, but it's one of those things where even though not every game is perfect, and you've kind of heard me talk about this a little bit with each individual game, I still feel like with a lot of these games, there's actually fun to be had with some of these games. Even if you have to turn your brain off for some of them, or even if they're not perfect, or, they are kind of, the typical licensed game kind of trash in some ways. I actually think there's some good stuff here. And if you are an Aliens fan and you haven't checked out some of these, I think there's some pretty good stuff to go back to, especially, on the Genesis, on the PlayStation 1, Nintendo DS, of course, with Aliens Infestation. And of course, if you haven't played Alien Isolation yet and you like stealth games, like, boy howdy, go play that game because that game is incredible. But what do you think about the Aliens franchise? Again, let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. As for me, you can find me on Twitter at Ryan Turford. You also find us on Twitter at Carpool Gaming. Also right here, youtube.com/Carpool Gaming. And as well, all of our podcasts are on podcast services around the globe, but of course, our website, carpoolgaming.com. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Pit Stop Retro Gaming about Alien video games, and I'm out.